Look here, here is the first PowerPoint on socialization, which aligns with Chapter 3 in your text. So you'll want to be reading Chapter 3 if you haven't already, on socialization. Socialization is a lifelong social experience where people develop their human potential and they learn about culture. Every society socializes their members differently. I'd like you to stop for a minute and think of some ways you, as an individual, are socialized to be members of your culture. Think about the institutions that exist within society: family, religion, public education, entertainment, the media. How do these agents of socialization teach you what it means to be members of your culture? Also, during the process, or through the process of socialization, your personality develops. Personality is a person's fairly consistent patterns of acting, thinking, feeling, behaving, etc. Sigmund Freud was a psychologist, so we're going to borrow some ideas from psychology just for a minute or two here. Freud had a theory on how personality developed. You have basically three components. And the personality of an individual develops largely based on society and what the social environment is teaching the person. You have the id, which are your basic drives. You hunger, thirst, for example. I'm going to skip down to the superego. The superego is how we internalize society's sense of morality. So whatever it is your parents are teaching you, or not teaching you, just kidding. So whatever it is your parents are teaching you, what your churches are teaching you, what you learn from your school system, from the media, this is what you internalize, and you come up with this idea, or these ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Now the ego goes between the two. It mediates between the drives that we all have, that I want it and I want it now, and the superego. Well, society says we can't really do it this way. So this is kind of how it works. For example, if my basic drive is hunger, I'm really, really hungry. We all have that drive. I'm walking by a bakery. I have no money, and I'm walking by a bakery, and I see that they have some fresh cookies and some bread just kind of sitting out. Nobody's watching it. I'm thinking, I could just take this. I could eat it. No one would see me take it, right? Stealing, though, it's wrong. So my superego would kick in and say, Brandon, no, society says stealing is wrong. Wait till you get home. You have food in your fridge. So if you have a weak ego, according to Freud, then you would give in. I would give in and I would steal the bread. If I have a strong ego, then I would be able to resist that temptation and not steal the bread. So you can think of the id as kind of being like the little devil on your shoulder telling you to do it, and the superego would be sort of the angel on the other shoulder telling you, you might not want to do that, you might want to wait. And the ego is kind of like the scale. It balances the two. Jean Piaget was another psychologist, a Swiss psychologist, and he talks about, and this is in your book as well, the 4 stages of cognitive development. We develop in a myriad of ways as human beings, and the way we're socialized and our surroundings have a lot to do with how we develop. And we'll talk more about that too as we progress through the course. I'm not going to beat you up with theory and stages. You can kind of see this, and these are discussed in your book. You have the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and the formal operation stage. The sensory motor stage, from birth to 2, infants are essentially learning through their senses. You touch something and it's hot. You put something in your mouth, it tastes a certain way. Pre-operational stage, young children start to use language and other symbols like we've already talked about. Concrete operational stage is when people start to examine cause and effect relationships. Young children start to understand, well, this happens, and here's why this happens. And then we get to where you guys are, hopefully, the formal operation stage of cognitive development, where humans start to think abstractly. They start to come up with ideas and conclusions independent of society. They come up with ideas on their own. Now, we could talk about lack of socialization. There are some cases of feral children children who supposedly have been raised by wolves or living in the woods, or really what we could probably more relate to are cases of social isolation where children are neglected, unfortunately. There's a sad case of Anna, a very popular case study of a woman named Anna who was born in the 1930s. She was discovered in 1938 in a farmhouse in Pennsylvania. She was basically locked up in a storage room, her hands tied behind her head so she couldn't move. Her clothes were filthy. She was super skinny. She'd been kept in a dark room with very little human contact and was barely fed enough food to survive. So you kind of get an idea how horrific that would be. Anna was born to an unwed, mentally impaired mother of 26. The grandfather was very strict, and he didn't want the child in the house because of the stigma that came along with the birth of this child. So she was passed from foster home to foster home until she was 6 months. Then she came back home, if you want to call it home, where she was locked up in a storage closet for 5 years with no human contact. Now you think, you could be the smartest person in the world. You could be biologically endowed with all these wonderful abilities to be intelligent, to take tests, to do well in school. But if you're locked up in a closet for 5 years and you miss out on human contact, are you going to be able to catch up? Are you going to be able to be smart, to do well in school? Probably not, because Anna missed a lot of those significant steps, developmental steps. She did not receive the proper socialization from her social environment. And we're going to see how that came home to roost. When Anna was rescued at 5½, she could not speak. She could not use language. She didn't know how to laugh. She didn't know what it meant to smile, what it meant to be happy. She was completely unresponsive. However, when she was rescued, she started showing some signs of improvement. In a year's time, she could feed herself. She was playing with toys. However, her development was still very slow, and it never caught up. At the age of 8, her development was still that of a 2-year-old. She didn't use words until age 10, and she actually died at age 10 due to a blood disorder, which was probably related to all the abuse that she endured when she was young. We've also seen some studies with animals in terms of isolation. One of the most famous isolation studies was done by a researcher named Harlow. He worked with rhesus monkeys, and what he did was he set up 3 different situations. You can kind of read them here. He had monkeys that were in complete isolation from their mothers for 6 months. Then he had monkeys that had an artificial mother with a wire mesh and a wooden head. So the monkey didn't look a whole lot like a real mother. And then you had monkeys that were with a soft terry cloth mother that really looked like a monkey but really wasn't. So you can kind of see the results of that. When returned to the group, the first group, where the monkeys were in complete isolation, they were passive and they were anxious. The second group, they could not interact with others in the group. In the third group, they were physically closer to their mother. So the more closely their socialization resembled a real mother in that real experience, the better that they were able to adapt. And then you have some images of this study. That's not a very good image, but you get the idea of the wire mesh monkey and the terry cloth monkey. And that's researcher Harlow with one of the monkeys looking all cute. The results of this study, monkeys greatly benefited from closeness to their mothers, and we can take this and move this over to the human world as well. We know that infants, if they can go several months, maybe even a year without proper socialization and catch up pretty well, but once you hit a certain point, it's not, there's irreversible damage. And we'll go ahead and call that the end of this first part.